For problem number 1, we are asked to create a program that will display and get the sum of the first 5 odd numbers using while loop. So output should look like this. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, the first 5 odd numbers, and the sum of these odd numbers. So here are the codes. We have to have 2 variables if we want to get the sum of the first 5 odd numbers and display it. We have to declare or initialize 2 variables. One is the counter, which will be the counter loop variable, and this will count how many loops have been created already. And variable sum, which will store the sum of the numbers being generated. So as you notice, we initialize the value or the variable sum to 0 because there is no number generated yet. But for counter, I have not yet initialized it. So what do you think is the number that we are going to use to initialize the value of counter? Very good. We have to set the value of counter to 1 because we are asked to create or to display odd numbers, the first 5 odd numbers, and the first odd number is 1. So our initial value of the counter is 1. Then we set the condition, which is if counter is less than 10. So if counter is less than 10, if this condition results to true, the program will execute all the statements inside the curly braces, which are to display the value of the counter, and then get the sum of the numbers being generated. And how do you do that? By adding the sum variable and the counter variable. And then we have to increment the value of counter. So as you notice, I have not yet placed the incrementation value. So what do you think is the incrementation value for counter? Very good. We have to add 2 to counter, simply because we want to generate odd numbers, and odd numbers have difference of 2. So we have here counter is equal to counter plus 2, so we can reach this condition. If the condition evaluates to false, then it will no longer perform the operations inside the curly braces, but instead it will go out of the loop and do the instruction or the code in the last line, which is to display the sum generated in the loop, in the loop. Let us simulate the program that we have created and see how it works when you run it in the computer. So we have here the variables that we use, which are counter, and then the sum variable, and then we compare counter to 10, and then display the output here. So the first in the program is to initialize the value of counter to 1 and initialize the value of sum to 0. And then we compare the value of counter. Is counter, which is 1, less than 10? It's true. So since it's true, the computer will perform the statements inside the curly braces, and that is to display the value of the counter, which is currently 1. So this is the output. And then let's get the sum of the counter. So remember that we are going to add the odd numbers from 1 to 5. So we have here sum, the value of sum plus the value of counter, and store it in variable sum. So we have here 0, which is the value of sum, and the value of counter. So we just simply add it. And then we get the result, which is 1. Then you have counter is equal to counter plus 2, the incrementation, so we can reach the condition. So counter, which is 1 plus 2, will become 3. And then we go back to the loop, which is to test the condition. Is counter, which is 3, less than 10? True. So therefore, perform again the statement, and that is to display the value of counter, which is currently 3. And then get the sum, which is sum plus counter, and that is 1 plus the value of counter, 3. Then what we get is 4. Remember, we are adding the first 5 odd numbers, and notice that 1 plus 3 is 4. Then we have here counter is equal to counter plus 2. Therefore, increment the value of counter by 2. Then this becomes now 5. And then go back again to the condition. Is 5 less than 10? True. So therefore, display the value of the counter, which is currently 5. And then again, generate the sum, and that is sum plus counter. So the current value of sum plus the current value of counter, which is 5, then this becomes 9. And then increment the value of counter by 2, and this becomes now 7. Then go back to the condition. Is 7 less than 10? True. So therefore, again, display the value of counter, which is currently 7. And then get the sum, which is sum plus counter, and that is the value of sum, which is 9, plus the value of counter, which is 7. And then increment the value of counter, which is currently 7. Okay. By the way, 9 plus 7 is 16. And then increment the value of counter, which is plus 2, and that becomes now 9. Then go back to the condition. Is the value of counter less than 10? And this is currently the value of counter. 9 is less than 10. True. Therefore, display the value of counter, which is 9. And then get the sum, sum plus counter, which is 9. And that is 25. And then counter is equal to counter plus 2, increment counter, and this becomes 11. Then go back to the condition. Is counter, which is now 11, less than 10? False. So since it results to false, it will now go out of the loop and proceed to the next instruction, which is to display the sum generated from the loop. Okay, and what we have generated from the loop is 25. So therefore, display or document that right, the sum is, and then the value generated for sum, and that is 25. So as you notice, we were able to display um, the first 5 odd numbers and display also its total using some variable.